Ladies and gentlemen, your host for this week's special episode of Talking Too Much with Media 13. Please welcome Jordan!
Yes, hello and welcome. I am Jordan, back with another special episode of Talking Too Much with Media 13, and I really think that you folks are not going to want to miss this one. You know, found footage horror really is a special thing. From the shaky camera work to that eerie sense of authenticity and the dread of feeling that what you're watching could just be real. It's as though you're looking through a peephole into someone else's nightmare from their own perspective. There's a profound, unsettling nature to this genre, a rawness that can draw you to a story with a level of intimacy that others can only hope to achieve. From the Blair Witch Project to something more polished and presented like Lake Mungo, they can make the unreal feel disturbingly like the opposite. Late Night with the Devil is the latest film to breathe new life into the found footage subgenre, taking it in a direction we've rarely seen before. Set during a live broadcast of a 1970s late night talk show, the film subverts the comforting nostalgia of late night TV, transforming it into an experience filled with dread and nightmarish tension. But this is more than just another found footage horror film. It's a dark exploration of how deeply personal emotions like grief, love, and faith can be twisted under the harsh glare of the spotlight. At the heart of all of this is a charismatic yet fundamentally flawed protagonist whose relentless ambition and desire for success drive him to the edge, ultimately leading to disastrous consequences. So grab a seat and together, let's unravel the layers of Jack Delroy and the haunting world of Late Night with the Devil. But first, a word from future Jordan. From now until the end of the year, I am trying to do weekly uploads. I can't promise that I'll be able to get through that, but I'm going to give it my best shot. That being said, if you enjoy this video and you feel like you might enjoy future stuff from me, then feel free to leave a like on this video and hit subscribe so that you don't miss that stuff when it drops. Alright, I've said my piece, you can get back to the video now. Jack Delroy is the host of Night Owls, a late night talk show that competes at the top of the ratings board with The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. The film opens with a lot of setups, introducing us to the fictionalised world we're about to step into. I feel like it's a tad on the long side, and I think that there are definitely things here that could have been cut out and left to the audience to piece things together. It isn't all that egregious though, and I think that's a large part of why I can't have too big a problem with it. It's more so just a little nag that I have. The main crux of this opening is Jack, played by David Dastmalchian in his first real leading role. I've been a huge fan of his work for some time now, from Prisoners to The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Hell, I even thought he was great when he popped up in last year's The Boogeyman. He always comes with such a commanding screen presence, stealing the show consistently. He's a powerful performer, and that's reflected accurately in his depiction of a late night show which feels incredibly authentic and well researched, unlike some other attempts to play a late night talk show host. There are a lot of nuances in the character that I think Dastmalchian does a great job of highlighting just enough so that they're discernible to the audience. There's these little quirks to the character that feel ripped right out of Late Night. He has this air of arrogance to his persona. Throughout the opening montage, we do see little moments that give the impression he isn't afraid to make it known that he isn't necessarily interested in every single guest he has on his show. Using his connections in television, he has made regular trips to a place known as The Grove, a collective of rich and powerful men across media and government. And something that actually does exist outside this film. However, I don't know to what extent, and so it's not something that I'd particularly like to get into today. We also learn that Jack was married to a woman called Madeline, who unfortunately passes away after a lung cancer diagnosis. The death of the love of his life takes a toll on Jack and causes him to take a step back from the spotlight. When he eventually returns, he comes to the harsh reality that the ratings on his show never truly recover. We also learn here that at this point, the highest rated episode in the show's history featured Jack having his dying wife on the show, which, I think feels incredibly scummy, but, I'm not going to judge. In a last-ditch effort to make things move and to make the ratings go up again, Jack decides to host an occult-themed episode as a live broadcast on Halloween night, and that brings us to the movie itself. Now narratively, it's sold to us as a mixture of the unedited broadcast from that night, interlaced with never-before-seen footage from behind the scenes. There has been criticism angled at the idea of the existence of behind the scenes footage in the first place, and I think a lot of this stems from the fact that it doesn't feel at all authentic. The characters don't ever acknowledge the presence of these cameras, which leads me to believe that the idea of framing this as behind the scenes was more of a post-production decision than anything else, and despite me trying to label this as a flaw, I'm actually perfectly okay with that. The special guest list for this extra special rendition of the Night Owl's Late Night Show consists of Christou, a psychic, Carmichael Haigh, a former magician turned full-time supernatural skeptic, and June Ross Mitchell, a parapsychologist author with the subject of her latest book, A Teenage Girl Named Lily. Christou is our first guest, quickly called into question over his authenticity when he's caught giving cold readings until we're met with the first major disruption of the film, where he is subject to a real premonition from someone he names as Minnie. Left incredibly shaken and beaten up by the experience, this prompts a cut to commercial in the first of a few segments that act as a little breather between big significant events. There's a nice amount of escalation in each of these commercial breaks too. There's this constant presence of degradation of both morals and sensibility as everyone just seems to lose their cool as everything progresses. Especially Jack, as the desperation for fame continues to consume the humanity that he does have left. Following up on it, Christou is visibly unwell and begs to leave the show but is denied that request, told to suck it up for the show because, well, to put it bluntly, Leo's a bit of a prick. The show returns and we're introduced to Carmichael the Conjurer, now just going by Carmichael Haigh, founder of the International Federation of Scientific Investigation into the Paranormal, or, IFSIP to keep it simple. Carmichael is such a great character purely because of the fact that he is just such an asshole. I find it nearly impossible to dislike this guy, even though I know I'm supposed to, given the fact that he does nothing but try to antagonise every single person in his path at any given moment. Ian Bliss plays him so well. He brings this cynical nature that's so infectious to watch because of that innate ability to get under the skin, even if he is sometimes nothing more than an entitled, snide prick. He arrives and instantly labels Christou as a liar, only for Jack to rise in his defence, admitting that the Minnie call from earlier was a reading meant for him, as it was the private nickname given to his wife. We never really see a further dramatisation of the conflict between Christou and Carmichael's beliefs, as it's at this point that Christou worsens significantly. He begins to projectile vomit a slick black liquid before a sudden cut to commercial, and I need to be honest, I really dislike this effect. It feels cheap, it feels so tacky, and the digital CGI look just completely spoils any immersion that had been building to this point. The movie has some genuinely great moments, but then for every one of those, there's a thing like this that just disappoints me because it ruins what's otherwise a very credible horror experience. This gets Christou his desired path off of the show though, as he's immediately rushed off set, and then we're moved on to June and her subject, Lily. Lily is the second most vital cog in this late night set list next to Jack himself, introduced to us as the sole survivor as a mass bloodbath took place in a satanic church that worshipped the demon Abraxas. Carmichael, as you'd expect, instantly disregards the claims that Lily is in any way connected to a demon, and even though June tries to tell Jack of the potential consequences that could come of it, his idea to respond to Carmichael is to convince, or rather pressure her, into summoning the demon that resides within the little girl. In the next commercial break, we find out that Christou has died en route to the hospital, and Gus begins to plead with Jack to shut the show down due to how uncomfortable he is, and oh my god, I haven't even touched on Gus yet. He is great and such an organic use of comedic relief throughout the movie. Rhys O'Terry is an improv comedian as is, and that's felt in the way that he can just so fluidly riff off of anything that comes his way. He feels like he does belong in a late night talk show, and that goes a long way in building back up the immersion that might have been, spoiled by some pretty shoddy effects. For a lot of the runtime, Gus is a pretty quirky character, but during this commercial break we see his facade drop significantly as he begs Jack to stop the show, only to be shut down because of the potential this episode has to save everyone's jobs. The show resumes and the summoning occurs, with the demon possessing Lily and causing the electricity to short circuit. Obvious nuances between Jack and June are confirmed by the possessed Lily when she reveals that the two have been sleeping together. There's also this moment where the demon alludes to having met Jack previously, claiming that it was under the tall trees. Carmichael, the ever-spirited soul that he is, calls bluff once more, now dragging Gus into a hypnosis experiment to try and debunk what we've just seen. He puts Gus under his influence, also ensnaring the audience in the process, which we're unaware of until afterwards, and we're shown this fucking great practical effect of Gus essentially being torn apart internally by worms. This is including a huge one that bursts right out of his eye. It's graphic as hell, and I'm not entirely sure what you're seeing on your screen right now because of how much YouTube tends to dislike this stuff, but it is truly great and only further highlights how disappointing the CGI digital vomit was from earlier. We then snap back to reality and the production team rewinds the footage, showing what we've just witnessed was nothing more than a hallucination that everyone in the studio, barring a couple of people, experienced, orchestrated by Carmichael Haig himself. This leads to him taking a very high and mighty approach, as we might expect him to, as he prepares to shatter everyone's minds by exposing the possession as fake, only to be stumped as the footage from that segment of the show remains completely unaltered. In what should be a moment of revelation for Carmichael, a pretty humbling experience, he instead decides to take a bit of a more aggressive approach and begins antagonising Jack. He claims that this is all an elaborate hoax, and Jack is in no position to get into any sort of confrontation at this time, because as it stands, he is currently shaken by the apparition of his dead wife, which was another really shit effect, if you don't mind me saying. The less said about it, the better, but it appears in the footage when they're rewinding it and looking back at what happened to Lily. While the tension escalates, Lily begins to convulse and June's cries for help go unaided as the young girl is possessed again, and here, shit's about to get real. With restraints no longer keeping her tied down, Lily rises to her feet as she starts playing with lightning. Her head splits open right down the middle and begins to emit this hellish glow. Gus ends as the unfortunate victim of foreshadowing as his head is spun around in his neck, killing him instantly. The attention then turns to June, who is lifted into the air by her necklace with the jewellery slashing her neck wide open, and Carmichael, who in one desperate effort to survive, tries offering a fucking demon a check. The demon, as you might expect, isn't interested in this in the slightest, and decides to turn him into a fucking barbecue. The studio descends into chaos and Jack is pulled to the exit by his producer before being thrown into some hellish rendition of his show. He re-experiences moments that we saw in the montage from the beginning with gruesome twists this time around. It's then revealed that he does have a connection to the demon that possesses Lily, having first encountered it at a ceremony within the grove. It's also revealed in one gut-wrenching twist that Jack is indirectly responsible for his wife contracting cancer, which is the unfortunate price for the Night Owl's sudden meteoric rise. Jack is confronted by Madeline's spirit, who begs to be put out of her misery. This is a surprisingly grounded moment in a scene filled with chaos and urgent imagery. We see Dastmalchian's acting credibility on full display here as he plays a broken man, traumatised by the sight before him. He initially refuses, but ultimately wants to help his terminally ill wife. Using the same ritualistic dagger from the cult Lily was a part of, he stabs Madeline, finally relieving her of the pain, only to have one final twist of a knife in his gut. The scenery around him changes once more as he snaps out of his own trance, with him now being placed back in the empty studio. It's revealed that all of that was nothing more than a hallucination, and in reality, Jack had stabbed Lily rather than what he thought was his wife. He stands mortified over corpses that litter the studio around him, and as the police sirens begin to draw closer in the distance, he emptily and desperately repeats one final phrase, praying to be brought out of this madness. Dreamer, hear, awake.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for a live television first, as we attempt to commune with the devil.
It wasn't supposed to turn out this way. You have to believe me.
Jack Delroy is a layered character whose journey serves as a downfall of both professional and personal proportions. His characterization is excellently portrayed through charisma, ambition, emotional vulnerability and moral degradation, making him a really compelling figure smothered in tragedy. At first glance, Jack appears as the quintessential late night host. He's charming and he's smooth and he commands the camera. His charisma is actually a key part of the persona he retains, allowing him to consistently hit those high ratings, even if he doesn't ever crack the top spot. This outward charm is meticulously depicted through Dastmalchian's performance, which captures the essence of a man who has mastered the art of public engagement. Jack's interactions with his guests and audience are laced with a facade of politeness and professionalism, yet beneath that polished exterior, there's a far more troubling reality. Jack's ambition is perhaps his most defining trait. He is driven by this desire to crack the top of the ratings board, which leads him to make one fatal decision that happens before the movie even begins. This ambition is evident in his decision to exploit his wife's terminal illness just for a ratings boost. The show's highest rated episode, which featured Madeleine, highlights Jack's willingness to prioritise his career over personal ethics and emotional sensitivity. This exploitation of personal tragedy underscores this darker side of Jack's character, a man whose drive for success almost eclipses his moral compass. His personal life, especially his grief over his wife's death, adds nothing but depth to his character. As much as we see his morally grey decision-making in the pursuit of fame, the film portrays Jack as this highly conflicted individual struggling with the emotional aftermath of Madeleine's passing. Despite his outward bravado, Jack's internal turmoil is palpable. His grief is compounded by the fact that Madeleine's death was surrounded by suspicion and unanswered questions, particularly regarding the diagnosis as a non-smoker, something that the film makes sure we're aware of when we find this out for the first time. I know it may seem like I've ridiculed Jack quite a bit, and in truth, I have, I can accept that, but at the same time, part of me also feels sorry for him, and I think that's a sign of a very richly complex character, because, for me, I'm struggling to feel just one emotion towards the man. Above all of the other things I see when I look at Jack, I see someone who is lost, and more importantly, someone who is afraid and desperate for what he's witnessing to be real, so that everything he did to get here can actually mean something. It's made apparent by the end of the movie that he was unknowingly responsible for his wife's sudden contraction of cancer. He took part in a ritual to see himself become a top man, totally unaware at the time that the price he would pay would be taken in the form of the woman he loved. There's almost this twisted layer of tragedy to Jack Delroy that oozes through Dust Malchian's performance. A rewatch makes everything so much more intriguing too. It gives the impression this time around that Jack knows what he did. We see a segment from their time on air together in the opening montage, and upon first inspection, Jack's face could simply be read as one of a distraught husband, unable to cope with seeing his wife in this condition. But upon the rewatch, I think I saw guilt. I could see the face of a man thinking, I did this to you, and I don't even know if it was going to be worth anything. There is this constant yet faint presence of urgency throughout Late Night with the Devil, and Jack is the driving force behind this, and his persistence and desire to press on with this could almost be analysed as a hungry desire for attention, like I've already implied. But what if I, told you now that there could be another factor in play here? Jack wants the supernatural to exist. Jack needs it to exist even, because if it doesn't, then he's only left with the reality that his wife truly did die of a completely random diagnosis. It has escalated to the point that for him, the thought of losing Madeleine to his sacrifice to gain something would be better than her death being natural. Late Night with the Devil does an incredible job of peeling back the layers of its protagonist, revealing a man driven by personal demons and professional desperation. Jack starts as the epitome of late night charm, but as the night wears on, we see just how deep his flaws run and how his ambition spirals into a nightmarish downfall. In the end, Jack's fate serves as a haunting reflection on the darker sides of ambition and the consequences of our actions. His desperate cries and the chaotic unravelling of his world are a chilling conclusion to a character who is both captivating and tragic. It does raise an interesting question, however. What would you sacrifice to make it to the top?